Have you ever worked late at the office? So late that the hallways are empty, the lights are dimmed, and every little sound seems amplified. You might think twice after hearing this story. This isn't just any ghost story. It's a tale that unfolds in the heart of India's Silicon Valley, Bengaluru, inside one of its sprawling, modern IT parks. A place that, by day, is a bustling hub of innovation and ambition, but by night transforms into a hunting ground for something ancient and terrifying. Our story begins with Rohan, a brilliant but overworked software developer. Like many in his field, late nights were his normal. Deadlines were tight, and the pressure was always on. One Tuesday evening, he was hunched over his keyboard, the only one left on his floor. The clock on his screen ticked past midnight. Suddenly, the air grew cold. The rhythmic hum of the servers seemed to stutter. Rohan felt a strange sensation, like 1,000 tiny needles prickling his skin. He dismissed it as fatigue, packed his bag, and headed for the elevator. That was the last time anyone ever saw Rohan. The next morning, his desk was empty. His manager assumed he'd called in sick. But when he didn't show up the next day or the day after, concern turned to alarm. A missing person report was filed. The company launched an internal investigation, starting with the security footage. And what they found sent a chill down everyone's spine. The cameras showed Rohan leaving his desk, walking towards the elevator. But as he waited, a tall, distorted shadow seemed to detach itself from the wall behind him. It wasn't a shadow cast by any object. It was fluid, inky black, and it seemed to writhe as if it were alive. It enveloped Rohan, and in a single glitchy frame, both he and the shadow were gone. The elevator doors opened to an empty hallway. Panic began to brew. Management tried to keep it quiet, attributing the footage to a technical glitch, a corrupted file. But then it happened again. Another employee, Priya, vanished after working late. The security footage showed the same horrifying sequence: the empty corridor, the approaching employee, and the predatory shadow that consumed them without a trace. The IT park, once a symbol of progress, was now a place of fear. People stopped working late. The once vibrant campus became a ghost town after 6 p.m. But a small group of Rohan's friends, Anjali, a data analyst, Samir, a hardware engineer, and Vikram, a cybersecurity expert, refused to accept the company's weak explanations. They knew something was terribly wrong. They decided to take matters into their own hands to uncover the truth behind the disappearances of their friends. Their investigation began in the building's archives, a dusty, forgotten basement room filled with old blueprints and city records. They were looking for anything unusual about the construction of the tech park. Anjali, with her sharp eye for detail, was the first to find it. Tucked away in a faded folder was an old map of the land from before the IT park was built. Her blood ran cold as she read the name inscribed on the map: Ashray Mental Asylum. It had been a notorious institution, shut down in the 1970s after rumors of horrific patient abuse and unethical experiments. The records were sparse, but they spoke of a place where the desperate and the disturbed were left to rot, their suffering echoing within its walls for decades. The asylum was demolished to make way for the gleaming towers of technology, but it seemed its dark history wasn't so easily paved over. The group realized the new buildings were constructed directly over the asylum's foundations. They hadn't just built on the land, they concealed its tormented past right beneath their feet. Vikram, the cybersecurity expert, had a chilling theory. He believed the massive amounts of electromagnetic energy generated by the servers, and the thousands of computers in the park were acting like a beacon, a power source. They were feeding the restless spirits of the asylum, giving them form and strength. The spirits, in turn, were feeding on the minds of the living, the stressed, overworked employees who stayed past midnight, their mental energy a feast for these spectral predators. The friends knew they were dealing with something beyond their understanding. This wasn't a technical glitch or a human criminal. It was a supernatural force. They needed more than just data. They needed to see it for themselves. Against their better judgment, they planned to stay in the office after midnight, armed with thermal cameras, EMF meters, and a desperate hope to find a weakness, a way to stop the entity. As darkness fell on the designated night, the three of them huddled together in Rohan's old cubicle. The atmosphere was thick with tension. The silence of the empty office was deafening. As the clock struck 12, the temperature plummeted. Their breath misted in the air. The EMF meter in Samrir's hand began to shriek, its needle jumping wildly. They heard a faint sound from down the hall, a soft, wet, scraping noise. It was getting closer. Peeking over the cubicle wall, they saw it. The shadow, it was darker than any shadow should be, a void in the dim light of the emergency lamps. It moved with an unnatural fluidity, slithering along the floor and up the walls. It wasn't just a shadow. It had a vague humanoid form, impossibly tall and gaunt, with long, spindly limbs. As it drew nearer, they could feel a crippling psychic pressure, a wave of despair and agony washing over them, threatening to shatter their sanity. These were the raw emotions of the asylum's former inmates, concentrated into a single, malevolent being. Anjali remembered reading a detail in the old asylum records about a fire that had partially destroyed one of the wards. The spirits of those who perished in the fire were said to be terrified of it. It was a long shot, but it was all they had. Samir, the hardware engineer, had an idea. He pointed towards the main server room. It was protected by a halon gas fire suppression system. If they could lure the entity into the server room and trigger the system, the sudden release of gas and the deafening alarm might disrupt it, mimicking the chaos of a fire. It was a desperate, insane plan. Vikram would act as bait, drawing the shadow down the main corridor. Anjali and Samir would race to the server room to override the system controls. Vikram took a deep breath and stepped out into the hallway. "Hey, over here," he yelled, his voice shaking. The shadow thing paused, its formless head turning towards him. It began to move, gliding towards him with an unnerving speed. Vikram ran, his heart pounding against his ribs, the icy tendrils of fear licking at his heels. He led the entity on a terrifying chase through the labyrinthine office, finally veering towards the server room where Anjali and Samir were frantically working. Now Vikram screamed as he dove through the doorway. Samir slammed a big red button. Immediately, alarms blared, red lights flashed, and nozzles in the ceiling hissed, flooding the room with fire-suppressing gas. The shadow creature recoiled as if struck. It let out a silent, psychic scream that vibrated in their skulls. The concentrated wave of pure terror it emitted was immense. The entity convulsed, its form flickering and distorting wildly. It couldn't withstand the sudden, violent sensory overload. It was like dousing a flame with water. For a moment, dozens of faint, screaming faces appeared within the swirling darkness, the trapped souls of the asylum, and perhaps the faces of Rohan and Priya. Then, with a final, agonizing implosion, the shadow dissolved into nothingness, leaving behind only the bone-chilling cold and the screaming alarms. They had survived. They had faced the horror and won. The next day, they presented their findings, the historical records, the EMF readings, the corrupted security footage that Vikram managed to partially restore to the company's board. Faced with undeniable proof and the threat of a massive scandal, the company had no choice but to act. They brought in experts, spiritualists, and historians. Cleansing rituals were performed. A memorial was built on the grounds to honor the forgotten souls of the asylum, finally giving them the peace they were denied in life. The IT park is open again. People still work there, but things have changed. No one stays past sunset. The story of the shadow of Bangalore became an urban legend, a whispered warning among the city's tech community. It serves as a chilling reminder that no matter how modern our world becomes, there are older, darker things sleeping just beneath the surface, waiting for a chance to wake up. So, the next time you find yourself alone in the office late at night and you feel a sudden chill, just remember, you might not be as alone as you think. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from the dark side. Stay safe and maybe try to leave work on time.